My name is Glenn Howard. I'm president of the Jamestown Foundation. We're delighted all of you are here today to attend this a very important event that doesn't receive a lot of attention here in Washington, but it does periodically rear its head. And we're delighted that we have three outstanding speakers here, minus Paul Global, who is, I'm hoping, is en route. He's on his way from a talk in Virginia. So he's got a very busy schedule today, so we're looking forward to having him. But we're going to go ahead and, for the sake of time, go ahead and get started. I guess, as many of you know, that the predominant strategic issue of the Caucasus, especially the North Caucasus, is one that has been, for over a decade now, has become a relatively important issue. It's now, with an insurgency that began in Chechnya and the start of the Russo-Chechen War in 1999, has probably increased its expansion into other parts of the Caucasus. And so that's for this reason today, because of the changing aspects of the region. There are old players in the region, but there's also new players. And for many of you who follow events and in the years ahead, you know that the 2014 Sochi Olympics is right around the corner. And for those of you that are familiar with the ethnic groups in the Northwest Caucasus, you're familiar with the Circassians. And increasingly, the Circassian movement and the 5 to 7 million strong Circassian diaspora in Turkey is becoming a very important player in the region and influencing much in the same way of Turkey's approaches to the region. And so for this reason, we decided today to make use of the ability of Mithat Çalıkbulaq, who's come with us from Istanbul to speak at our event, to kind of offer some changing perspectives about the region. First and foremost, Bagash recently, from Abkhazia, the leader there, went to Turkey, had a very interesting visit in Turkey. And increasingly, Turkey is playing a wider role in the Caucasus, and not just in the South Caucasus, but in the North Caucasus by virtue of its diaspora of the Circassians. And with approximately about 10 different Circassian diaspora groups inside Turkey, it makes it a very interesting dimension to it. And so for this reason today, we wanted to kind of have bring to you an old familiar face in Pavel Bayev, who, if you picked up a copy of the book today, you'll see has a couple articles in that book, and we're very happy that he could be here because Pavel has, I think, a very refreshing perspective about the North Caucasus and has been a long-time observer of Russian policies there, and I think is very well suited to be able to talk about this. I think Mithat is even more suited for that purpose to talk about it, what it means for the Turkish perspective. And for that reason today, we also asked him to address kind of Turkish policy towards Abkhazia, not only the North Caucasus, but Mithat is also a Circassian Turk, and so he also has an interesting perspective from his own ethnic background. And last but not least, we have Paul Global, who is always the one that we turn to, and hopefully he will be here today. But if he doesn't, well, we'll miss him. But I think Paul Global has an interesting perspective because he tells us what all this means. And as I can quote Paul, who often has stood at this podium, he talks about the U.S. perspectives on it, and as he constantly reminds us, he says, the United States plays checkers and the Russians play chess. And I think that is I think the Caucasus by itself is a very important chessboard and grand strategy, and is a region that is becoming increasingly important. And I think with the Sochi Olympics coming around the corner, it's becoming even more important. But in light of all that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Pavel Bayev. You have his bio. He needs no introduction. He's very well known here in Washington. So Pavel, you'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Glenn. I'm very glad about this opportunity, and Jamestown is certainly my favorite think tank in the city, overpopulated with the species. But I have to confess that it's my 5th presentation in the matter of 2.5 days, which gives me a very intimate understanding of what the term brain dead actually means. So I'll do my best, because that's a topic in which really I have a lot of feelings. Caucasus is something of a passion for me, and I have to again to admit that I'm not traveling nearly enough into the region, as there were in good old years, armchair strategist, I am probably a desktop Caucasianist, getting most of my information either from the contacts with friends or from what is there in the web, and the amount of information available there explodes exponentially. What makes it a little bit easier for me to perform this research is that I'm not focusing on the region as such. Most of what I'm doing is about Russia, Russia's policies in the Caucasus, and particularly Russia's application of force in the Caucasus. And in the 20 post-Soviet years, there has been a lot of that, in various forms, with various level of success, and the list keeps growing, and there is never the same. It's not the same deja vu all over again. It's always an evolving subject matter. And my latest report on that will be published by E3 in Paris later this month, written probably 3 months ago. And now I do have a lot of disagreements with my own conclusions there. Because even 3 months in the Caucasus is a lot of time, and writing books on that matter is probably close to mission impossible. Where kind of my main disagreement with my own conclusions from that report is now is probably in assessing the trajectory of instability in this region, because a few months ago it was very, very clear that the line of escalation goes up and up and up. There is more instability of various forms that spreads from one of the part of North Caucasus to another. It comes to Moscow with the explosions of the Domodedovo. It takes new forms, but escalation was very clearly there. What we see now is that Moscow has managed to achieve several very important hits, very important military successes, counter-terrorist operations targeting particularly the leadership of rebels in several republics, in Ingushetia, in Kabardino-Balkaria, and that certainly has an effect. Together probably with the symbolic impact of the extermination of Osama bin Laden, about which Medvedev mentioned today, taken together it might create a pause in the escalation of instability. We might probably expect that this summer would be not as tense, as rich in various rebel attacks as the previous one. Again, it's my speculation, but there are some kind of grounds for that, because successes of this kind very often generate that effect, but on the other hand, pause is just a pause. Importance of that pause is that this is a very special year. And if we had this uninterrupted escalation of instability, then it would have been a very important factor in the all kind of delicate political maneuvering in Moscow about reconfiguration of power, control of political power. It's not necessarily between Putin and Medvedev. It's generally oversimplification to reduce it to that. But there is a lot of political maneuvering, and the kind of growing instability in the Caucasus would have made a serious impact, probably as serious as it did back in '99. If there is a pause indeed, then it's not a factor. Then this reconfiguration develops on a different logic, and it doesn't mean at all that the new leader who is installed after that has a free hand, has kind of a great opportunity to stabilize the Caucasus, because all the basic factors of instability are still there. The pause might help with this reconfiguration, but hardly with anything more. And I'm trying to develop an argument in many of my research that it's a very complex instability. And what we see on the surface as kind of terrorist attacks is just the tip of the iceberg. And trying to dig deeper into the roots of this instability, sometimes you find conclusions that are very counterintuitive. For that matter, for instance, it's interesting how little impact on this instability have ethnic factors. North Caucasus being as ethnically divided as it is, with all sorts of histories enmeshed there, any analyst would tell you that would become the main factor. And there is some of that. There are certain tensions, particularly between Ingush and Ossetians. There are some other, but overall, it's not that much as could have been expected. And for that matter, news of this year, more and more we hear about the Russian Wahhabits, which is going to, again, from the ethnic perspective, something unthinkable. There is definitely in this region a very particular, a very special case of Chechnya, which is a strong factor generating instability across the region. Probably what makes this case that special is that, any young man in Chechnya who is now 25 got most of his education in the battle zone. And for every teenager, a war was there from day one. And that's not the case in other North Caucasian republics. That makes Chechnya very different. And besides, the leadership in Chechnya is certainly also very special. And most of you know, you don't need any explanation, what is Ramzan Kadyrov. When I thought how could I possibly explain to an innocent American what sort of leader is that, I probably can think it's probably about the same as if Al Capone would have taken power in Chicago back in the 20s. And not just taken power, but was kind of installed there by the federal authorities. And established his control all over the whole city, and then what you do with him. He demands more money and more money. How to control this sort of local leader is impossible to say. I would be very reluctant to advance any recommendations, but it is a huge problem. Definitely there is a lot of and very complex factors of instability related to the rise of Islamic extremism. And there are better experts than me on Islamic extremism. What I can see is very often, from the best of experts, I hear explanations that are kind of logically circular, that there is a kind of growth of terrorist networks because kind of the Islam is spreading further, and Islam is spreading because there are more and more oppression against, from Russia against this clandestine networks. It is becoming a kind of self-explanatory thing. What I'm trying to argue is there is one very strong underlying reason, which in fact is a very common thing in itself, which is corruption. And corruption is an all-Russian phenomenon. There are a great amount of statistics showing how corrupt Russia is. In the North Caucasus, for what I'm able to see, it not only acquires some completely grotesque forms, but also has merged with the power structures, with the local authorities to such a degree that it's a huge generator of instability in itself. And some parts of that instability are very direct, because there are kind of wars between corrupt clans, which are very often presented as terrorist attacks. And there is a lot of financing going from this corruption into the terrorist networks, into the kind of Islamic networks on top of that. But there is also another impact from that very deep, very well-established corruption rooted in the very nature of the local patronymic regimes. And there is societal reaction, that the societies are becoming fed up with this corruption, that there is a protest against that, that it really has acquired such forms that it's becoming unacceptable for many. It's too visible, it's too blatant. And essentially this reaction against corruption, societal, is the stuff from which revolutions are made. We observe much the same thing in the Middle East, societal reaction against corruption as a driving force of these revolutions. And again, that's something, there is some new quality in that across this region. And Medvedev was very quick to jump on this new quality, saying, yes, these revolutions in the Middle East might have an impact on the developments in the North Caucasus, though his thinking and his logic was mostly influenced by God knows what conspiracy theories. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's completely wrong. Because, yes, revolutions are a very peculiar phenomenon. There is a lot of demonstration effect. And the fact that these revolutions were not at all driven by Islamic forces, but mostly by the societal reactions on corruption is important development. It shows an example to many societies that whatever, however kind of deeply rooted are these patronymic structures, however kind of everything is controlled, and suddenly it can be destroyed like that. And so earlier this year, it was very visible that in Moscow it was nearly a panic about the combination of these developments, of the revolutions in the Middle East and their impact, and about the escalation of terrorism in the North Caucasus. Coming together, it appeared to be such an unstoppable trend. Then suddenly in the Middle East, the situation with revolutions is more or less stabilized. Some of them are suppressed, some are kind of being suppressed. The civil war in Libya is stalled. It looks much less dynamic. And as I've said, the escalation of instability in the North Caucasus is on decline. And so in Moscow it's a big sigh of relief. The panic was for nothing. In fact, we can expect that these problems will be not that acute, and Moscow typically turns from panic to neglect, saying everything is fine, there is no need to do anything in the North Caucasus except for great investment of money. And we see how this financial situation is discussed. It is peculiar in many ways that despite all the economic hardship in Russia, and the crisis was very painful, and hit with far greater force than the leadership expected, and the budgetary situation has deteriorated greatly, there is no decrease at all in funding for the North Caucasus. To the contrary, there is kind of a lot of talk about supplementing federal, direct federal funding with more investment, which is seen as a key to stabilizing the situation. But suddenly money for the North Caucasus as a quite a new political context. Suddenly there is a lot of discontent in the society about how much money is really going to the Caucasus. The demonstration in Moscow was not very numerous, just a few hundred people, but the resonance was very big, because the slogans which were advanced that too much money is going there, we don't have enough in the Russian regions, resonated very strongly. And indeed, the point is that on the course of this political campaigning, under the slogans of stability, as Putin does, or under the slogan of kind of change and modernization, as Medvedev does, and again, this kind of will be simplifying, because Putin does a lot of things about modernization, and Medvedev is very reluctant to distort stability, but there are more or less these two alternative strategies. It is very clear that money is the issue. There is not enough money for stabilization because economic growth is very slow. Russia cannot expect another decade of prosperity as in the 80s. It's just not there. And as for modernization, being it in the North Caucasus or being greater, it requires a lot of investment. And investment flows not in there but out of there. Out of Russia in general, out of North Caucasus in particular. A lot of money which Moscow powers there finds its way back into Moscow. More and more you hear about how the kind of the clans from North Caucasus are buying this, are buying that, investing here, investing there. Moscow is a great investment opportunity, but essentially it means that money is flowing out of where it should be creating jobs and should be creating something new. So a lot of the economic strategy designed by Moscow for the North Caucasus doesn't look serious at all. A lot of analysis which underpins this strategy doesn't look serious at all because, truth be said, the kind of main thesis about huge unemployment in the North Caucasus doesn't look very solid. It essentially means that the all the economy in the region is just not registered. It's kind of in the shadow, in the gray area. There's a lot of employment there. The region doesn't look poor at all, by the way. So it's not really a depression, just a very particular economic distortion. And it's easy to identify this unsustainability, saying, yes, there is a pause now, but with this economic strategies, neither of which is sound, we cannot expect this pause to last. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to diagnose this unsustainability of the situation. And what else? What then? And here certainly we come to a very difficult predictions, because there are some situations, and revolutionary situations in particular, which are unpredictable by definition. My best expectation is that the evolving instability might take different forms, might probably follow a bit of the same trajectory as in the Middle East, where instead of Islamic extremism we now see much different forces at play, where in fact bin Laden had become irrelevant before he was exterminated. So my best expectation is, again, was some of the similar development in the North Caucasus. But again, that's probably the limit of my optimism. Thank you for your time. It's about as much as I can take.
Just a second. Okay, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mitat, and thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Mitat Çelikpala from Turkey, Istanbul, Caucasus University. I would like to start to convey my sincere regards to Jamestown Foundation and Glenn. It's my honor and pleasure to be here and to speak to such a kind of important audience who are working on those Caucasus, North Caucasus or Circassian related issues. I am here for a couple of days, spent some time in New Jersey with my Circassian cousins, friends. I also thank to them for their friendship. And I'm going to speak on Abkhazia, with North Caucasus and Turkey's foreign policy outlook and new activism. Is it a part of activism, or is it a little bit different than this activism issue? Turkish-Georgian relations, and of course, as Glenn mentioned, Bagap's last visit to Turkey. And you all know Bagapsh visited Turkey in early April. For a couple of days, 4 or 5 days, he spent some time in Turkey, starting from Ankara to Istanbul. He visited Adapazarı and Düzce, mainly Circassian and Abkhazian populated regions of Turkey. And this visit was very important, and at the end, diaspora in Turkey, or Circassian and Abkhazian diaspora, was very happy, and they have organized lots of occasions for him, and they met together, and Bagapsh was, I may say, if I may say, was very happy to see all those Circassian fellows and Abkhazian groups. I have participated almost all those activities in different parts of Turkey. I'm going to try to analyze the visit and its effects on both Turkish foreign and domestic policy, and at the same time its reflections on the region, Turkish-Georgian relations, and maybe Turkish-American-US relations as well. Just a couple of hours before Bagapsh has landed on Ankara, Turkish Foreign Ministry released a press release. And in this release it says, Turkey attaches the utmost importance to her strategic partnership with Georgia based on traditional friendship and comprehensive cooperation in all fields. Turkey perfectly shares the sensitivity of Georgia concerning her territorial integrity. In that respect, Turkey respects and supports the territorial integrity of Georgia within her internationally recognized borders, a policy that remains a fundamental position. The visit of Mr. Sergey Bagapsh to Turkey will take place purely on medical grounds, open invitation by civil society associations founded by Turkish citizens under their sole responsibility. This is the diaspora organizations. And the visit has by no means an official character. Turkey reconfirms its commitment to deepening the strategic relations between Turkey and Georgia to the benefit of our peoples and the region at large. As you see and read from this press release, Turkey's position is so clear, and Turkish decision makers or the foreign policy conveyed direct this message to Georgian authorities, and most probably just before the visit they gave some strong and direct signals to Abkhazian authorities, because just a week before the Bagapsh visit, some advisors or some people from Abkhazia came to Turkey and traveled a lot. And if you check the websites of all those associations and diaspora groups, you can see the messages. Please calm down. Take this visit as an important beginning or pioneering event, but organize all those events very carefully. We don't want to see Abkhazian flags around. We don't want to see all those rallies on the streets. You can do whatever you want. In Adapazarı, for example, is a small town in between Ankara and Istanbul. But in Ankara and Istanbul, Bagapsh met with different journalists, academicians, bureaucrats, business groups, but not bureaucrats, because it's not an official one. Before then, Bagapsh has intended to visit Turkey a couple of times, at least two. One is April 2007, the other one is October 2007. The first one was cancelled because of health reasons by Bagapsh himself. At least officially it's declared that it's a health grounds. But the second one was cancelled by a phone call, very just on the verge of the visit from the Turkish Foreign Ministry. It is it's 2007, because of most probably Georgian pressures. And the Foreign Minister of this period, the current ambassador to London, Ünal Çeviköz, himself called Bagapsh on the phone and cancelled the visit. But the question is that, what has changed? Why Turkey allowed Bagapsh this time to enter Turkey to meet with all those brothers in an unofficial way? And as you guess, Bagapsh very quickly recovered when he landed on Turkish territories, when he met with his brothers, and there was no health problems. And I may say that in the search of those kind of questions, of course Turkey has some concerns about developments in the Caucasus, and it changed its position recently to be involved more in the region as a soft power. This is new phenomenon for Turkish attitude or Turkish foreign policy, being a soft power in all those regions, in all those issues in the region. However, it is not an easy task, because Turkey is a member of NATO, a close ally of the US, and negotiating member with the EU. Has close relations with Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan there, and there is another rival in quote, Iran is also there. It is not easy. And as you all know again, there are growing tensions regarding Turkey's new activism in Turkish in foreign policy arena, and almost everyone, our allies, start to discuss the meaning or the ways that activism brings in the regions. And some couple of first, I don't want to go into detail, we may discuss if I have some questions, but I want to go to the other issues. This proactive, reactive, regional solutions to regional problems, geopolitical priorities and responsibilities, Turkey as a center, the centric power. These are new sayings, and there are some traditional inputs of Turkish foreign policy, as you all know, the Ottoman experience and its long-lasting legacy. In fact, most of the people thought that it's a new phenomenon introduced by Davutoğlu, but it is not. It is not. It is a traditional, one of the main pillars of Turkish foreign policy. When you look at any Turkish foreign policy book, you see this Ottoman legacy easily. and geographical and geopolitical realities of Turkey and ideological foundations. Most probably, if you start to analyze Turkish foreign policy, you have to focus on these ideological foundations to see whether Turkish foreign policy outlook has changed or not. This is the main pillars. The others are the same. At least I believe it. And this new foreign policy activism does not necessarily aim to abandon it is already established allegiance to West. In fact, Turkey, I may say, while proposing to create a stronger influence within the strategic regions, including the Caucasus, of course, has also aimed, how can I say, to better its position within the Western world as a country of great prominence. And as Davutoğlu in each and every occasion reiterates that Turkey's increasing presence in Eurasia, starting from Caucasus to Central Asia, will contribute to its request for the EU membership by using an analogy of a bow and arrow. Our foreign minister very keen on using all those kind of analogies. He argues that the more Turkey, the more Turkey strengthens its bow in Asia or Eurasia, the further and more precisely its arrow will extend to Europe. Or the transatlantic world. Hence, he stated that, in quote, if Turkey does not have a solid stance in Eurasia, it will have very limited chances with the EU. In return, Ankara contemplates, I may say that, Tehran and Moscow will benefit from Turkey's alleged and promoted intermediate role between the West and the East. And from then on, what are the, or were the main pillars of Turkey's Caucasus policy? And for Turkey, there are two different Caucasus. One is the north, the other one is south. For the North Caucasus, there is no need to discuss so much because it is part of Russian Federation officially. Therefore, it's related with Russia's domestic politics. Do not touch upon any issue related with these North Caucasian issues. But it is not easy to reach that point. When you go back to history, for example, from 1991 to 1993, you see at least covertly active Turkey in all those regions because of different reasons, mainly diaspora effect, to balance Russia, to be an actor in all those regions, to regain its strategic importance in the world arena, different issues. But Turkey has changed its stance after 1993-94 because of the Kurdish issue, PKK terrorism, and most of you remember easily Albert Chernyshev's wording. He says, "Who are living in glass houses, do not throw each other stones." It's very serious. Turkey has changed its stance, but between 1991 and 1993, North Caucasus in the radar screen of Turkey, especially Chechen issue, and then the Abkhazian issue, because it is not easy to differentiate whether Abkhazian issue is a North Caucasian one or the South Caucasus. For the South Caucasus, there is Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, energy issue, Nagorno-Karabakh, Abkhazia and Ossetia, and the territorial integrity issue. And Turkey's main interest is to keep territorial integrity intact for Azerbaijan and for Georgia. But it is a little bit mixture, because there's a diaspora. Diaspora was so active, especially in those days, and it is not easy to calculate the real power of diaspora in Turkey. No one knows. It is impossible. You can see diaspora, Circassian or Abkhazian, or the North Caucasian, it's changing its character time to time, easily on the street. For example, they give some newspaper advertisements and accuse Turkish government, for example, to support Georgian army and Georgian state and to be part of genocide in Abkhazia. Full pages. It strikes Turkish foreign policy of Turkish foreign ministry and politicians in Turkey. Therefore, they have to change their attitude very quickly. At least they have to respond diaspora's expectations. But on the other hand, high politics, territorial integrity, friendship, international security, and alliance. These are main issues, or we can see diaspora very quickly organized in different cities, in big cities, all demonstrations around. And diaspora have links with the US diaspora, diasporas in the Middle East and different countries, and Europe. They organize very quickly, and after 1997, for example, they invented the EU. They easily participate in different meetings and conferences within the EU bodies, and they inform different groups. These are leverages and powers. But at the end, I may say that it is not easy to develop a common policy towards diaspora, but diaspora's limited influence is there. Since 1997, I may say that for the North Caucasus, Turkish foreign policy outlook is silence, a sort of indifference, watching all those developments very silently and try to understand what's going on. But after 2001, there are two big events. One is 9/11, the other one is the governmental change in Turkey. AKP took the government and took the power and started to run. And the third one, this is also, I have to mention in the first section, the Russia factor. Turkey changed its outlook towards all those regions. In 2001, there was an agreement signed between Turkey and Russia. Eurasia, the partnership agreement aims at Eurasia, to pay all those regions together to cooperate to solve all those issues. And Turkey started to change its mind and to add new factor in its foreign policy making towards all those regions. This is trade and economy. Turkey partly put the security priorities a little bit aside and started to look at trade and economy to infiltrate all those regions, to put the rivalry aside and, if it is possible, to cooperate with Russia to shape all those regions. But to say the last thing, at that moment, I may say that this is it's not a permanent policy, because Turkey's outlook towards all those regions is much more different than Russia. Mainly, Russia wants all those regions under its control to keep the status quo intact and not to change all those regions. But for Turkey, change is important, to change the region, to take all those countries or people and to make a part of Western world, all those security organizations, and to rise Turkey's effectiveness in all those regions. At the end, most probably, we will see clashing interests. I don't know whether within 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But when we go back to our analysis, Turkey's new assertiveness in the Caucasus has started after 2008. Before 2008, you cannot see any difference in AKP's foreign policy or policy towards Caucasus compared with the 1990s. Energy, territorial integrity, Nagorno-Karabakh, frozen conflicts. But to keep the status quo, this is the main pillar. But what happened in 2008, status quo has changed drastically. And it was a threat to Turkey's all policies, because it ruined Georgia's territorial integrity. It ruined all those Turkish investments in all regions. Turkey lost its all connections to Azerbaijan and Central Asia. It is a serious danger. There was a direct threat to Turkey's Black Sea security policies, and it's not easy to control all those regions, and working together with Russia does not solve the issue. And at the end, they found that the decision makers, they are not thinking in the same way in Eurasia as Russia thinks. Because Russia changed the balance, ruined the international order there, but Turkey is trying to cooperate with Russia, but this cooperation collapsed down. And in 2008, this new activism brought us, as you all know, two main initiatives. Caucasian Stability and Cooperation Pact. It is still that one, no future for this stability and cooperation platform or initiative, because Georgia and Russia was working fighting each other. Abkhazia, Azerbaijan and Armenia, there is still a war between those countries. Turkish-Armenian border is closed. And then what kind of a security platform or initiative? The other one is Armenian opening. And there is no interest towards North Caucasus before and after 2008. They don't care. Turkish foreign policy doesn't care. It is the domestic politics of Russia again. And trade-wise relations, Turkey, I know, tried to establish some links in the southern part of Russia, some bases and logistic centers, trade-based activities to make Turkey a more soft power, to rise Turkish flag there. There are some issues that I want to touch upon at the end, and especially Glenn asked me. These are Circassian genocide issue, this is related with North Caucasus, Sochi Olympics, and the position of diaspora, and lastly Abkhazia, of course. For Circassian genocide issue, there are some scenarios. I don't know which one prevail within a couple of years. The first one is most probably Turkey stand again a little bit away from all those discussions because it reminds us Armenian genocide discussions. Therefore, it is better to keep all those diaspora groups under control as much as possible to not rise this genocide issue. This is one option for Turkish policy. The second one is to support the idea of genocide, to how can I say, to dilute or strain the Armenian cause, to add some other genocides and to treat the issue as an old issue of empires. All those empires in that time killed masses, deported, and did something wrong. This is another option. Or the third one is showing no interest and being quiet to watch what is going on and to allow some other sections of diaspora or some other regional and global actors to develop a position, because it is a chance for Turkey, for example. You may say that, for example, Russia accepted Armenian genocide despite the fact that Russia and Turkey are cooperative actors, but Russian government or Duma accepted the resolution. Then it's a retaliation. This is another scenario. What about diaspora's position? The Circassian diaspora in those days, not clear on this genocide issue in Turkey. Some other sections of diaspora living in different countries other than Turkey are more clear than Turkish diaspora. This diaspora tried to define itself between Russia and Abkhazia and the other diaspora groups. It is a serious case. For Sochi, I may say that Turkey's evaluation is trade-wise looking. Turkish companies competing for development projects connected to Sochi Olympics. It's very important. And I may remind you that the big business circles in Turkey acted as if they are representing Russian interests in Turkey sometime, because they are big business in Russia, in former Soviet regions and Central Asia. Therefore, all those big business companies are working as lobby groups in Turkey. Most probably, they may again start to work to let the Sochi Olympics be organized. And most probably, within a couple of months, the diaspora groups may crystallize their ideas and perspectives regarding this Sochi Olympics. For Abkhazia, again, before and after 2008, we have a watershed. And Russia, again, is the main denominator of Turkey's policy towards Abkhazia. There are issues. As I mentioned, 2 visits had cancelled. At the end, Bagash managed to visit Turkey. But before 2008, for example, Turkish foreign policy or decision-making bodies are more in prone with Georgia. At least it seems that. But between 1999 and 2009, in trade-based relations, more than 60 ships were reportedly captured by Georgian authorities. These are Turkish ships bringing some goods to Abkhazia. It is interesting, and for Turkey this trade is important, and it's very important aspects of Turkey's soft power. And the last case, the last one, was the seizure of Turkish ship on international zone, international sea in the Black Sea in August 2009. And in August 2009, Foreign Minister Davutoğlu promptly fled to Tbilisi and discussed the issue with Georgian friends. And then there is a slightly changing Turkish foreign policy or policy outlook towards Abkhazia. I don't know whether officially agreed with Georgian authorities or not, but it seems that Georgian authorities keep a bit more silent comparing with 2008 towards Turkey's attitudes to Abkhazia. For example, 2009, a senior diplomat from Turkish Foreign Ministry visited Suhum, and they discussed different issues. And after 1 year, 2010, Turkish ambassador to Tbilisi, Murat Burhan, visited Suhum, and he said that working groups had been set up to expand the bilateral ties between the two sides. And it is possible to establish direct trade relations or lines with Abkhazia. And Turkish ambassador most probably give some clues just before his visit to authorities in Tbilisi. And now it's said that 45% of exports of Abkhazia sold in Turkey, and about 60% of Abkhazian imports came from Turkey. And Turkey again became a sort of soft power trade partner in Abkhazia, and Abkhazia's custom duties. Turkey directly or indirectly supports Abkhazian budget. It's a direct economic support. And I may say that the prospects of Turkey recognizing as Abkhazia as an independent state remains highly unrealistic, and Ankara's political stance toward Abkhazia would continue to be in line with the US and EU in general. And as we can see from the press release, Ankara prioritizes Georgia and Georgia's interests, and Abkhazia's increasing ties with the rest of the world, I may say, especially via Turkey, will ultimately be a positive development for the peace process with Tbilisi. This is Ankara's concern and policy outlook. I don't know officially they are agreed with Georgian authorities or not, but I can see a trend beginning from 2008 up to those days. Turkey is slightly changing its policy towards Abkhazia and some other issues, but I believe it is in line with the interests of US, Turkey's allies, and Georgia. What about Bagap's visit? And he said they have the priority to establish links with Turkey because of trade, economy, and cultural reasons. Then political negotiations is far from the table, and there is no need to force Turkey to recognize Abkhazia politically. But we have time. We will see in the future that Turkey recognizes Abkhazia. I don't know. We will see. And these are my points. I think I'm out of my time, and I'm very pleased to have some comments and questions. Thank you very much indeed.
in the Arab world have ended the sense of unchangeability in the world, that there are various events that occur when people decide that that has opened a time when things are in motion, that many people in Central Asia, many people in the Russian Federation who look at what has happened in Egypt and Tunisia and elsewhere have the sense that the world has moved from a period of stasis into a period of incredible change, or at least the possibility of change. And when people move from a period of stasis where the usual terms of art are used, where the usual definitions are assumed to be appropriate and effective, there's a tendency to go into a time when people are open to the possibility that some of the old terms need to be completely rethought, and that some of the vocabulary that is used in a new period may mean something totally different than it meant during a period of stasis. I would suggest that the discussions in Moscow and among Russians of the cost of the North Caucasus should not be read now the way they were read a year ago. I think what you are seeing is not whether we can afford to rebuild the North Caucasus, but whether it's worth doing it, whether it's worth trying it. And that is a fundamental shift. I think that one Russian writer pointed out about 10 days ago that while 90% of Russians are willing to go to war to hold the 4 islands that they seized from Japan, 60% of Russians are willing to let the North Caucasus go away if it will stop causing problems. To which one commentator pointed out that it won't stop causing problems even if it's in a set of independent countries. But the point is that the discussion of the cost of holding the North Caucasus, it seems to me, should not be about how much more will we have to spend, but why should we spend any more? And that is a very different understanding of what's going on. I think now, as we enter into the political seasons of the elections in the Russian Federation, both parliamentary and presidential, when you have sizable portions of sizable numbers of commentators raising the question in that way, you are talking about a different reality than you were a year ago. Does that mean that we are about to have independent countries across the North Caucasus? I fear not. At least not as soon as some of us would like. But I think that it's going to happen. And I think that we are in a second round of the sense of change and possibility that happened in 89 to 91. And that, I think, should lead us to revisit our understanding of the terms we're using. The second point with respect to that is that we are all familiar now, whenever we talk about a nation, that it is an imagined community. That's standard operating procedure. But nations aren't the only thing that are imagined. So are regions. It is worth noting that we no longer speak of the Trans-Caucasus. We speak of the North Caucasus and the South Caucasus. I think that the day is coming when we will speak of the Caucasus. And I think the primary reason that's going to happen was the Russian war of August 2008. Because what the August 2008 war did was to obliterate the difference that people had assumed between North and South. It is now no longer possible to talk about the South Caucasus independently of the North, or the North independently of the South. And it is precisely when we are talking about Abkhazia and South Ossetia that we are talking about the links between those two things and the transformation of our mental geography from one which keeps these separate to one which brings them together. Whatever we do on the basis of that, whether some people would then say we yield to a Russian drought of regard in the South, and others would say that our concern about the current countries, three, should extend to others. I have written, as some of you know, that it would be a very wise, a very useful thing to imagine for a moment if the West were to take a diametrically opposed stance on Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Let me suggest to you that the people who would be the most angry about the appearance of 27 NATO embassies in Sukhum would not be the Georgians. That would be a transformation, and it would change the North Caucasus and a great deal else. I don't think that's going to happen. But what I do think is that the discussion we've been hearing about Turkey's problem is that Turkey is standing exactly at the center point between the redefinition of moving from a discussion of the North Caucasus versus the South Caucasus into a situation where we are talking about the Caucasus. That's a major shift forward. And I think when history is written with a little more distance, we will remember August 2008 as the Russian bridge too far. But what it did was to destroy an intellectual construct which kept people in many countries, among Turkey, in thinking that they could write off the North, or that was a Russian domestic problem, and the South was the only game in town. That doesn't mean any specific policy follows. It does mean that we are talking about a region in a different way, and I think that is happening. I would argue that Turkey and other countries' sub-rosa games in dealing with the Abkhazians and the South Ossetians only deepen that process and promote a greater sense that we are in an era, we are entering into an era of changeability rather than an era of where the old truths, the old definitions hold. I would also, I would like to talk about the Circassian genocide and the Sochi Olympics for a minute, because that has been mentioned by both speakers. When I get a little older than I am now, it is one of my aspirations to write a book called Mass Murder is Wrong. The only reason that I will not write that until I'm older is that it would make me unacceptable even in more places than I am already. Because one of the more unfortunate aspects of the human condition of the last 50 years is that we seem not to be able to about mass murder, and we seem compelled to find it having a genetic or ethnic component. It was very unfortunate, it seems to me, that the Ukrainians felt it necessary to worry out as much as they did about what happened in 1932. That was mass murder. Is mass murder less bad than genocide? I think we need to start talking about mass murder because there have been a lot of terrible things. I think the pursuit of genocide is, again, one of those things which I fully understand the politics of it, but is ultimately detracts from what was done. Did the Russian government kill hundreds of thousands of Circassians? The answer is yes. Did that happen in 1864 and the years just before? The answer is yes. Does that legally fit the definition that was drawn up for genocide in 1947? I think that's a question for the lawyers. I think that's one of our problems, and I think one of the things that I learned when I was working with the Baltic governments as they were pursuing the recovery of their independence is that you always told them, never ask for something where you'll be told no. Always ask for things where you'll be told yes, and arrange to ask the question in a way so that you will get support rather than that you will get told no. In other words, one of the points was, don't ask for an OSCE denunciation of the occupation of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania until you make sure there's only going to be one objection from Moscow, because then you could work the issue. It seems to me that it's important that the Circassians, both in the North Caucasus and in the diaspora, focus on getting the attention first and foremost that this was a mass murder. I would be delighted to see declarations calling this genocide. I put it to you, the international community, as currently constituted, will do almost everything it can to prevent that from being widespread. Turkey will be worried about 1915. Other people will be worried about other things. That doesn't mean it wasn't a genocide. I happen to think that it was. But I think we have to, let's get on the record that this was a mass murder conducted by a state against a group. If you don't want to call that genocide, пожалуйста. But the reality is it was. And let us be clear. I find it unfortunate that we're worrying about a word and we're forgetting the hundreds of thousands of people who were killed. I'd like to have them remembered rather than lose this fight. Because I can tell you that if 2 years from now we have genocide rejected by half a dozen parliaments around the world, it will be far harder to make the point to the international community of just how much the Circassians suffered at the hands of the Russians. I think we need to think about that. Again, I'm not saying I'm not in favor of declaring it a genocide. I am. But I'm also a realist about what's possible. And I think we need to ask ourselves what we really want. And I think what we want is justice. And justice does not require a word. Justice requires a recognition of fact. And there is a lot of fact out there on one side. And you can go a whole lot longer. If, for example, to take another case, if you want to take the issue of what happened in 1915 in the Ottoman Empire, you can get a lot more agreement on how many people were killed under what circumstances on all sides than you will get if the first thing you say is we've got to declare it's a genocide. That's just a reality, and it's something I think we should think about. I think just as the Russian government committed a fatal error by invading Georgia, because it destroyed the division between North and South Caucasus, so too Mr. Putin has made another major error entering into this new world where I think there is a sense of changeability by pursuing the Sochi Olympics. Having a Winter Olympics in a tropical zone is not the cleverest thing you can do. Okay, we'll start with that. Holding an Olympics on a killing zone on the 150th round anniversary of that killing is not the cleverest thing you can do. Because what is going to happen is what is already happening. On the one hand, there's a whole lot more attention to the killing that took place in 1864 than there would ever have been. Circassians should get down on their knees and get an icon of Vladimir Vladimirovich and say, thank you very much. You have made our issue. But it is more than that, because we're beginning to see, as several people have pointed out, that the Circassians are going to be able to get side payments on this from the Russians in a desire to keep them relatively quiet. First, there is going to be, at Sochi, when the Olympics happen, and I think they unfortunately probably will, when they happen, there's going to be a participation of Circassian cultural elements, and it's going to be done with the support of the Russian government. Some of you will say this has been denatured. Of course. But it will be a way of a building block towards something bigger. We have already seen the Circassians asking for the restoration of a Shapsug autonomous district. I wouldn't be surprised if Moscow agrees. And if Moscow does, and Moscow will do it because it is still thinking in stasis rather than in a period of change, it will not understand that what the Circassians will have done by getting Shapsugia back, as it were, is to open the door to a new set of changes among other groups. And that's what I see coming. Let me end just by making one comment about something we've heard. There has been a great deal of discussion in the last week about what it means that Osama bin Laden is no more. Let us be clear. Bin Laden never mattered very much in the North Caucasus. Al-Qaeda never mattered very much in the North Caucasus. And his death will not matter very much in the North Caucasus either. One of the things that we need to make very clear is that there are many people who support what he was for who are still going to be around. And the Al-Qaeda organization is an organization with serious discipline. The idea that this is all going to go away because this was simply one charismatic individual, I think, is a dangerous misconception. But what I would say is that there is there too a chance for a new sense of changeability, that the world is about to change again. It seems to me that just as the changeability in Eastern Europe was begun by people who said, live not by lies and do not be afraid, we're finally seeing that again in the Caucasus region and around. And that we need to think about it as what we say and what others say, not in terms of the world of stasis where tomorrow will be like today, but where tomorrow will be fundamentally different. If you analyze the discussion of the cost of the North Caucasus, you will see that that is not about whether we should spend more money in Chechnya. I've always thought that the Moscow's aid to the Chechens was part of the Vladimir Putin retirement fund structure, because it was never intended to go to Grozny. It was intended to go to Bern. Okay? I mean, this is a corrupt criminal enterprise, which we are pleased to call the Russian state. That's what it is. I'm sorry, but that's where we are. And we've got to stop talking the language of stasis to understand that. We have to understand that talking about what happened in 1864, which was a mass murder in which many of us in this room feel was a genocide, it is more important to document that and bring it to the attention of the world than worrying about a single word. And the obsession with the single word, I regret to tell you, is going to be an obstacle to making progress. And third, with respect to the Sochi Olympics, as I say, it's easy to get an icon of Joseph Stalin. It should not be too hard to get an icon of Vladimir Putin. Circassians around the world should be grateful that this lieutenant colonel of the KGB, and as Captain Nikitin said, there are no ex-KGB officers, just as there are no ex-German shepherds. This guy has made a fundamental mistake. Going into Georgia was a huge mistake. Holding the Olympics in Sochi is a bigger mistake, because the things he will do to partially, quote, diffuse the Circassian issue, if the Circassians are clever in how they present it, will play into this process of a new sense of changeability, so that when we gather here again, perhaps we can discuss something more useful, like how large should our embassy be in Sukhum. Thank you.
Well, on that note, we'll open the floor to questions and answers, and we have a few minutes set aside for that, and I think Paul Goebel certainly stimulated our thinking on this subject. So there's right in the back, and then we'll move here. And please wait for the microphone so you can identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Alexei Sapchenko, and I'm representing here myself. I have a question to Mr. Goebel regarding the mass murderer. By the same token, wouldn't it be open a door to a bigger issue, like, for example, what happened to millions of Germans during and after World War II in present-day Poland and Czechoslovakia, what happened to Italians in Dalmatia and Istria, and actually what happened during the Allied bombardments of Germany?
Absolutely. One of the points of my career when I had to do something, and it did something intelligent rather than not, was when Alex Benningsen suggested I write a doctoral dissertation on the extermination of the Germans of Königsberg by the Soviet Red Army. I pointed out that doing a doctorate on that, with that as the title of your dissertation, would get you a job only in Uruguay or Paraguay, if that, because you would necessarily alienate just too many people talking about that issue. That unfortunately is also true. Look, that's the reason I said something about writing a book about mass murder is wrong, because I think there are a bunch of cases. I'm not trying to avoid confronting mass murder. I'm trying to make it easier to confront those kinds of mass murders. If the only kind of mass murder we're going to be upset about is one that we can fit in, or the international community can fit in, to the 1947 definition of genocide, then we will ignore an awful lot of crimes that have been committed by an awful lot of people. And what I was saying was to open it up. I also believe that it is good politics to try to get people to recognize that there was a mass murder of the Circassians in 1864, to get that on the public record in as many places as possible, rather than having people say, as they have said in a variety of countries so far, it wasn't a genocide, I'm going to pay attention to it. That was my point. So I have no problem of this raising other issues and raising other questions. If what you're suggesting, of course, is that everybody's guilty and therefore nobody's guilty. No, that's nonsense. First off, there are people who do things and there are people who did not do things. There have been Russian rulers who have behaved very well, and there are Russian rulers who have behaved very badly. The same is true in other countries. It is not about writing one country off or writing one regime off or saying it didn't happen elsewhere. It is to recognize that there have been terrible crimes and to recognize the diversity of them, rather than only accepting as true crimes those which fit the 1947 definition, which has always struck me as problematic because it lets people off the hook. I'm sick and tired of reading articles that say what happened in Ukraine in 1932 wasn't a genocide, from which it follows it wasn't a crime. Forgive me, it was mass murder, and it was organized mass murder, organized by the state. And whether you call that genocide or not is, to me, of less moment than recognizing that it was mass murder. But obviously that opens it up and other people have problems. But it is a far more honest way. And in this case, in the Circassian case, one can get a whole lot farther because there's a whole bunch of political forces around that are going to fight to the death against calling it a genocide. And what will happen is it wasn't a genocide, therefore it wasn't a crime. And that's the worst possible outcome of that narrative. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, this guy wait, we have to go in order here, but we'll try to get to you each.
Thank you. I apologize. I will have to run. That's why I'm jumping in so quickly. My name is David Rakuashvili. I'm the Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Georgia. And obviously I cannot leave this room without commenting on some of the issues that has been raised here. I would comment and make some clarifications rather than give questions. First of all, I would speak about the practical thing about the Turkish ships flowing into Abkhazia. You mentioned about 60. None of them actually, but two were seized that were under the Turkish flags. So usually what you see there, you see some commercial vessels who has as the destination port of Sochi. On their way to Sochi, they literally turn to the right, and that's how they end up in Sukhumi. So there are all kind of legal and political justifications to why we do that and what is the rationale behind. We are in negotiation with the Turkish government. Before coming to Washington on this posting, I was part of that negotiations. I also was part and behind the strategy on the occupied territories, which actually aims to finding the channels and legalizing the trade with Abkhazia and with people living there, because we no way mean that there should be any isolation. The only thing we want from our Turkish partners, and they largely understand this, is to frame it in a legal way that both Ankara and Tbilisi respect. I also would speak about the moral side of the issue when you have mentioned about Bagapsh visiting a diaspora. The reason why you have such a large Abkhaz diaspora is the same that you have such a large IDP number in Georgia now. And that goes back to Russian Empire. And when speaking about the common trouble, and when speaking about why people have been suffering, if you refer to the Abkhaz-Georgian War of 1990, it started in 92, it continued in 93, you should take in account that that war very much was largely of a criminal nature. There was enormous number of criminals involved on both sides. We were the failed state. We didn't have friends. And politicians or people who were in charge of or in control of the power certainly contributed a lot to convert this conflict, which has certainly been inspired from the same source, to be converted into some kind of ethno-political conflict, which has been largely kind of justified by the Russian invasion in 2008. But I want you to pay attention, and just for the audience to be aware of it, that the reason why Abkhaz diaspora does exist is because they fought a number of wars against Russian Empire together with Georgians. And when speaking about the diaspora claims of genocide in Abkhazia, that's again bringing me back to the Bagapsh issue. Bagapsh is behind the regime, or is the representative of regime, which is behind of expelling 80% of the population. And there is nothing to speculate about, whether Turkish or Ankara, official Ankara, will ever accept it or not, because it's not because they kind of are pro-Georgia, pro-US. You have serious and pretty substantial reasons not to support any separatism, right? And I also would like to comment on Mr. Baev's suggestion that there was an escalation and that has been de-escalated, that Moscow has managed it. I'm afraid that has been a pattern of a couple of 100 years, that Moscow manages to stop the violence and then leaves the vacuum behind, and is not then intervening with the soft power or any substantial substitutions. And we saw Chechen nationalism killed alongside with 240,000 people, and then we saw a room for radical Islam. And unfortunately, that's a pattern, and my question mark is certainly whether Moscow wants the problem to be solved, and whether the problem solving is at all the modus operandi for the Kremlin, or quite in contrary, Moscow is something which governs the issue or manages the issue while having a problem there. On the Turkish positions in the Caucasus, I think that we see a completely different Turkey, and I don't believe that changing policy towards either Bagapsh or Abkhazia or Georgia is at stake. I think that there are larger things at stake, and we see the motives certainly going beyond the region. But that would take me into some complete larger discussion. So thank you very much.
I'm not well versed in the history of the Caucasus and had never heard of the Circassian massacre before today. And I'm a little surprised to learn that it occurred in the 1860s, which makes it contemporaneous with our own genocide, or mass murder, if you will, of the American Indian. Today, that genocide, I think, plays a trivial part in our politics. And I'm getting the impression that it's not true in the case of the Circassians, and I wonder why that is.
There are Circassians in this audience that might answer. Mr. Ugar from New Jersey is Circassian.
I would say primarily because of two reasons. One is that the Circassian genocide and all its elements, as opposed to the situation with the Indians, has been mostly hidden by the Russians until recently, where we were able to get some documentations from the Georgian government in regard to the genocide itself. and that proves that actually those mass murders, as Mr. Gogol mentioned before, actually did happen, and they were documented by the Russians themselves and their military mechanism and archives. Second, and more importantly, Circassians today is a nation in existence, and 90% of its population are existence outside Circassia. And they've continued to maintain the culture, the tradition, the language, and everything that related to their motherland, Circassia, in almost intact way, and they are still deprived of any right of repatriation or association with their motherland. So the genocide in view of many of the world's, primarily Circassian and Circassian scholars, is a continuing one, not only a hidden one, but also a continuing one. So that, I guess, makes the issue today is important in the 21st century to address. And on top of that, we have to add the Sochi element that actually is going to, or the planning of the Sochi Olympic, that is one of the most festive events of the world to be held on land where an entire nation not only was massacred, but also was kept out and remains outside the Caucasus. Thank you.
I would like to say, just in this very room, in 2007, there was a first ever conference in Washington on the Circassians, past, present, and future, that was held where Gobel was a keynote speaker. And at that time, and most Western analysts didn't even know what, they were still using the word Cherkess, the Russian derivation of the term of Circassian. And a very, very not well-known issue. But, you know, then again, in the 1980s, how many Americans had ever heard of Azerbaijanis or Georgians? And so there are still nationality groups within Russia, and today the Circassians were divided in 3 republics in the North Caucasus, and now they're asking for to be reunified as one republic. And so, you know, national consciousness is in countries that are empires, and there's still a significant minority of non-Russian people live in Russia. Still make up a very important part of that, and that's why there's increasing awareness in the West, along with the elevation of the understanding in the Circassians in the North Caucasus of of what their ethnic identity is. And so, I just wanted to mention that. We keep going here. Any other? Keep going with questions. And Valerie, so here, I'll just hand the mic to him.
Thank you. It's again, as ever, it's a very interesting conference on the North Caucasus, even though rare, unfortunately, but I hope events like that will continue. My name is Valery Zubtsov. I write on North Caucasus for the Jamestown Foundation. I have a question for Pavel Bayev and for guests from Turkey as well. First, for Pavel Bayev, is the question is the Russian Empire and later Soviet Union was very successful in co-optation of ethnic elites across the Soviet Union and across the Russian Empire. How do you assess, what's your assessment of the modern level of co-optation of North Caucasian elites? If it's low, why it's not, you know, getting higher? If it is okay, then could you describe just in a few words? And the second question is about the visa regime change between Russia and Turkey. What is your assessment of the impact it will have or will not have on the North Caucasus? Because obviously the North Caucasians living in Turkey will probably have it easier now to visit the North Caucasus. Thank you.
Yes, it is a very interesting question about co-optation of local elites. And the tradition is rich and very different in the Russian Empire and in the Soviet Union, where a lot of social engineering were tried. Very clearly, it is a central part of Putin's idea how to stabilize the North Caucasus, to buy loyalty, to find local allies even such unpleasant personalities as Ramzan Kadyrov, who again makes a special case, but to find local support and build on that. Where I see the system doesn't work is this cooptation brings results which even by Moscow standards are unacceptable, because the spread of patronage, the spread of this patrimonic microsystems in the North Caucasus very rapidly acquires such forms that it's becoming instead of a factor of stability, a factor of destabilization. It kind of turns around. Hence the recognition that we need to reshuffle. We need to change leadership here and change leadership there, and sometimes twice, like in Karachaevo, Cherkessia. Because you put somebody in charge, you deliver their money, and immediately the clan system springs into existence, which becomes a kind of acquires such a parasitic character that it stifles all other social, political, economic life in that particular territory. Problem Ramzan Kadyrov is unchangeable, is untouchable in this respect. You know, in every other republic during Medvedev's years, there are kind of attempts to replace those who have become probably too corrupt and too inefficient with some new figures to create a little bit through that, a little bit of dynamism, a little bit of kind of possibility for changes in this society. But very quickly the new figureheads are becoming as inefficient and as corrupt as the previous one. So this whole strategy of buying loyalty is becoming a factor of destabilization of the region, simply because the level of corruption, the level of inefficiency in these institutions is becoming too high.
Thank you very much indeed for the question. In fact, it was in my note, but I forgot to touch upon it. Therefore, it's a great chance. I think it's very important for diaspora. This Turkish step, in fact, is a revolutionary one, and it's dramatic. It has drastic changes, most probably, because all those diaspora members in Turkey try to go to Russia or their homeland, and it is not easy to get Russian visa. It takes time, and you are under surveillance and control, and it takes time. You have to go to the embassy or consulate to get visa. You spend lots of money, it takes time, and most of the time, if you are an active member of any diaspora organization, or if you are saying something negative to Russian interests, it is almost impossible to get visa. But in this case, it is easy to travel a lot. And most probably, most of the diaspora members in Turkey started to visit their homelands, want to see what's going on. They try to find their relatives. Beforehand, for last 20 years or 10 years, mostly more active members try to go to the North Caucasus to see their homelands, to establish some links. But in this case, for many, most probably, all those diaspora members, Circassians, Shapsurs, Hatkars, other groups, will organize different trips to find their relatives and to spend some time. And moreover, it will start a sort of relationship between investors doing business, because Turkish government very actively supporting any kind of activity, and they may find some joint ventures and invest some money. This is a kind of soft power that makes Turkey important, and moreover that will make the diaspora more active in all those issues. And this kind of an interaction most probably will allow Turkey to be more active in the North Caucasus, step by step, and then it is possible to establish some links via Turkey between North and South, and this is very important. Therefore, this change in visa regime, liberating the visa regime, is from my point of view, is a revolutionary step within Turkish-Russian relations last 20 years.
Let me ask you a question. I've heard that the visa agreement for visiting the North Caucasus is separate, that the North Caucasus is considered a special zone that is off limits in terms of this Russian-Turkish visa-free travel, that
I don't know.
Only for...
no, I haven't heard of it. Because I don't know.
That's...
That's
what I'd heard. I don't know.
Let me check it. But if such a kind of reservation in this visa facilitation regime, that makes everything more complicated, and then designate some states and some regions to travel. But I don't know. Let me check.
Paul, do you?
Hussein, I'm from the Turkish embassy, and just to make a clarification on the visa agreement, it doesn't include any such reservation, and it covers all holders of Russian and Turkish passports, Russians traveling to Turkey and Turkish travelers to the Russian Federation. Limitations can be put into effect by central authorities, not while giving the visa, but maybe travel restrictions can be imposed by central authorities within the country. I mean, but in the visa agreement, there is no such thing. And secondly, the abolition of visa is a reflection of a more broader policy. Turkey is abolishing its visas with Syria, with African countries, with Latin American countries, and it's a reflection of Turkey's desire for opening up to new regions. And abolishing visas with neighboring countries was especially important, given the declared policy of the government that declared policy of zero tolerance, zero problems with neighbors, and starting direct flights, creating new economic and trade links, abolishing visas, intensifying people-to-people contacts. These are all the results of Turkey's desire to be present in its neighboring regions through its soft power. Thank you.
May I add something else? And you know, it's possible for Abkhazians to travel by using their Russian passports to Turkey. But Bakash mentioned during his visit that they are negotiating with Russia to allow Turkish citizens to enlarge this visa facilitation regime, all-inclusive, also Abkhazia. Therefore, it is possible for a Turkish citizen, an Abkhazian for example, to travel to Russia, to enter Abkhazia without asking any visa, and come back via Russia again. Therefore, it is almost impossible for an Abkhazian and for a Turkish citizen with an Abkhazian descent to go to Abkhazia without having Russian visa or multiple visa, because you have to go to first Sochi and then through Adler to Abkhazia, and then you have to come back, and you are in need of getting multiple visa. This is a very costly thing. But if Abkhazians establish such a kind of a regime with Russia, then you can see Turkey's effects and policies, reflections on Abkhazian issue, Georgian, Turkish, Abkhazian relations. It will have some spillover effects, most probably. This is another aspect of this visa facilitation regime.
My name is Yuri Urbanovich. I teach politics at the University of Virginia. My question is to Pavel Bayev. It's a pity that representative of Georgian embassy has left. He mentions that Abkhazians and Georgians, through the centuries of their, history, fought against the Russian Empire. But my impression is that Georgians were the beloved children of the Russian Empire. If you look, at the number of Russian generals of Georgian descent, and by the way, a Russian, colonel who arrested Imam Shamil, he was a Russian, officer of Georgian descent, Prince Tsitsishvili. Then Georgia was extremely well integrated into the Soviet Union, under the Soviet Union. And let's not forget, who was, Soviet dictator for 30 years, and who was his right hand and left hand. So my point is that, you know, when Georgia saw considerably changed, I would say, its orientation after the breakup of the Soviet Union, from the point of view of Russian political elites, it was considered as a betrayal of a beloved brother. You know, when Lithuanians, Estonians, Latvians left, I mean, you know, nobody cared. But this is, you know, almost psychoanalytical, I would say, parallel. When a beloved wife leaves you, you are ready to kill her. If, you know, a wife whom you do not love, I mean, is leaving you, you don't care. So my question is, don't you think that there is extremely, you know, significant emotional aspect in Russian-Georgian relations, particularly because among non-Slavs in the former Soviet Union or Russian Empire, the only people who belong to the same civilization as Russians are Georgians, Orthodox Christians who adopted Orthodox Christianity in the 4th century. Thank you.
It is a very difficult question. And certainly, you know, history in this respect is open to many interpretations, and cooptation of Georgian elites into the Russian Empire is a very good example of what you were asking about, particularly since Georgia was one of the states with extremely high proportion of nobility. Probably only Poland had about the same proportion of nobility as Georgia, and all that nobility was accepted in the Russian Empire as aristocracy, which was probably the best possible technique of incorporating Georgia inside. Myth-making about who fought with whom against what is a very important nation-building technique, and Paul Gobel was talking about imagined communities. Myth-building is such an instrumental thing here. For that matter, you know, in Georgia now, the whole idea about Caucasus one and who, about Georgian ties with the North Caucasus, is complete construction, is kind of really inventing something out of nothing, but it is politically useful, and it helps resolve certain problems. It helps build certain ties, and then why not? There is no historical, civilizational, cultural foundation for that. When Georgian and Circassian are sitting on one table, they cannot really eat the same thing and drink the same thing and sing the same song. Nothing works on this table. But still they're trying to build their bridges, and why not? As far as kind of the emotional context of the Russian-Georgian problems are concerned, yes, they are certainly there. And this context changes a lot because attitudes towards Georgia in Russia had its own ups and downs. And in the late Soviet period, being a Georgian in Moscow wasn't really very, there was all sort of cultural stereotypes related to that. Something very corrupt, something throwing money left and right. You know, that was, again, the idea of a Georgian. Still, nevertheless, certainly Georgia is perceived as something much closer than Central Asia, than Azerbaijan, and then in many other parts. And that's why I definitely hope this foundation remains there. And whatever the political conflict is, it will be possible to overcome, preserving this foundation. Whatever other political efforts at destroying it at both sides, I hope it runs too deep. I hope these ties will survive, whatever political stupidity is there. But again, conflicts do have their own, do create their own dynamics. And the impact of the August War, particularly on the Georgian side, is very painful and very deep. I can probably quite agree with Paul Gobel about how fundamental, how kind of monumental sort of mistake it was. I'm generally surprised that the effect of that war, in many aspects, has disappeared so fast. particularly in Russian relation with NATO, with the West, with the EU, how strong is the desire to close the page and forget it. So maybe the mistake is not that monumental as sometimes described, but nevertheless, it's one of those cases where not dealing with it properly, not giving it enough attention, leads to aggravation, to all sort of malignant growth of the issues, which might erode to whatever cultural foundation we have.
We can go for one last question. No, not you, behind you. So.
It's not a question, it's a quick comment. I wanted just to make clear that you said...
you might identify yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about Georgia and Russia being, the same civilizations. What about Abkhazians? They're still Catholics. What about Circassians? Part of them are Catholics, part of them are Christians, part pagan and part Muslims. And what about Ossetians, who are also... I decided to speak because I've seen here in this auditorium so many cliches created by the same policy that Russia developed towards my people, the Circassians. For example, how many of you know that in Russia we are not allowed to call them ourselves Circassians, all of us, until recently, because it can be compared just to make it clear. If you in the United States declare that all people who live in Massachusetts ethnically must be called Massachusetts people, all people who live in D.C. must be called D.C. It's the same. All Circassians are named by the places where they live, not by their ethnic name. That's the policy of division. It's politics, and the land is also divided in 3 different administrative politic republics. I just want to make it clear. Thank you.
One last thing, we've got to call it quits for today. I'm sure. What are your...
Just a notion. I had been in Georgia a couple of times, and I've read a little bit about Georgian history, Circassian history, and right next to me is a Circassian historian also who would attest to certain facts. Circassian and Georgians and Abkhazians and Ossetians, aside from religion, in my view and of what I read, they share many, many commonalities. You could start with the linguistics, the mythologies, with the traditions, with the hospitalities that remain in existence until today in the North and in the South Caucasus. Similarities between Abkhazian and Circassians is striking. Similarities between Abkhazian and Georgian is striking, and that somehow indirectly render its relation between Georgians and Circassians. Food, culture, customs, language, mythology, everything else has a very, very striking relations. At times not indirect, but it does exist. But the last thing that really can build the bond in a very indisputed way, and that is the DNA research and results and indications that show a historical and biological, actually, similarities among all these North and West, North and South Caucasus people, as we see it today in many research and many articles, scientific and otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. It's a small group that's interested in the North Caucasus here in this town, and hopefully you've been enlightened in some way, shape, or form, and we hope to see you again at another Jamestown event on this important region of Russia. Thank you.